Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for an episode of the Daily Biz Link. Today, we're featuring Stacie Mallen of Lead with Trust, and today we're focused on a conversation about what individuals need from their leadership right now. Stacie, thanks for being here today.
Grateful. Thank you.
So, what is it? What should we be more mindful of? What do individuals need from their leaders right now, especially as we're navigating COVID-19?
Yeah, so one thing that's been highly relevant, and I think I reached out to you initially, was one thing I'm finding is the universal human truth is people really want to be seen and be heard. They need to be seen and be heard. But what I'm finding as I'm coaching leaders and working with teams is that leaders are struggling with their own stuff. So the question is, how do I show up for other people when they're struggling? When I'm struggling. And these are things that I've been focused on really for the last 6 months with leaders and teams for that reason. And we can go into the theoretical, right? Lencioni, the elements of vulnerability, trust. That's the core, that's the foundation. Trust accelerates results. I mean, these are things I talk about all the time. But it came to mind to maybe share some of this information, because what we started diving into is the how, the tactical execution of how do you help your leaders show up better for your people. And that's something that we're finding a lot of success with in teaching leaders how to do that. And so but let's just say it out of the gate. It's hard. Everybody is challenged right now and stretched. And I think I've been watching these episodes and podcasts and everything else, that seems to be a universal truth.
So is there anything specific that we could potentially provide to our audience as far as what they could become more mindful of, or, potential best practices or tools that they could look to implement?
Yeah, for sure. And so we read a lot of leadership books. They tell us the what. So let's talk about the how, right? And I got 3 big tips for me that I've been using, I think, universally across teams that I've watched help teams start to bridge this gap and leaders bridge this gap. One is the foundation of really having trust is to share with vulnerability. That is really hard for people right now. And it's like saying to someone, people need to be seen and be heard, so be a great listener. Leaders are going to say, I am a great listener, right? So how do you help people show up as a better listener? How do you help leaders show up with greater vulnerability? So these are really tactical level skills. And one thing, everybody's on Zoom calls right now. One thing that I'm having teams implement is some level of vulnerability at the start of every call. How do you start every call? By sharing first yourself as the leader, sharing where you're at. How are you feeling? What's going on for you? Because that will invite vulnerability by the rest of the team. I'm on so many calls with leaders and teams, and they're just jumping right into agenda, or they have no agenda, and they're doing a check-in. But it feels very cold and false, right? Because there's no human connection on a personal level. So this vulnerability creates that warmth right out of the gate on the call, and by a leader sharing first. And be prepared to be as vulnerable as you want to be. That's the other thing, right? Be as vulnerable as you're comfortable. Go into the call knowing you're going to do this. It's okay to be prepared and say, hey, this is what's going on for me in my life right now. So that's number 1, is sharing vulnerability. Sharing vulnerability is closely matched with then listening. So as other people share, but instead of listening, and we can be highly distracted. You and I are in different rooms right now. I'm not at home, but my kid could theoretically walk across behind me. It's hard to focus. But being seen and being heard is part of you connecting with that person that's in front of you. And so listening with curiosity. And so I want people to start thinking about that. As I listen to your story, how are you speaking about your experience? What are you feeling? And really trying to get into understanding where that person is at. That will help you listen with greater curiosity. A good friend of mine, Scott Peoples, has been citing recently, words are either windows or walls. And so if people are speaking a lot and they're not being heard, that's what puts up walls. But if you're listening with true curiosity, he uses the euphemism as when you're traveling to another country, everything's like every croissant you have is exceptional. everything feels exceptional because you're curious and you don't know. So approach every Zoom call, approach every meeting, every one-on-one with curiosity. When you travel, Lindsay, does the things feel better to feel? Does food taste better for you?
Absolutely. I'm totally on board with that overall thought process for sure.
Yeah, so I think just think of yourself, and that's Scott Peoples has been talking a lot about this, and I respect him a ton. And when he said that, it just made a ton of sense. This is something that we've been talking with about our team. The third thing from a very strategic but tactical level is have some questions. You know, how many times do you get to a one-on-one and you're sitting across from each other and now sitting on a Zoom call from each other? And I hope you're having one-on-ones, by the way, very important now more than ever. And you're staring at each other and the person's just rattling off whatever they're rattling off, right? That doesn't feel good to them and it doesn't feel good to you. So how do you have a better interaction, especially when you're one-on-one with someone? And that is to develop some questions that this is a coaching skill that we develop as coaches. And I'm a big believer that the best leaders are the best coaches. Coaching is about asking questions. So it's okay to develop a toolkit of 3 to 5 questions that you have that you can utilize to open a conversation or to help those people feel more connected. Some examples, I'm just going to read these off. I didn't want to, just fly by the seat of my pants completely. But so some of the things that I ask a lot are, what's the most recent accomplishment that you've had that felt the best, right? That's not just about the insight about what they accomplished, but what feels good to them right now. And maybe that will help them navigate their work moving forward. When do you find you're the most motivated? That's a really great thing for leaders to learn about the people that are in front of them, because maybe they're super motivated in the morning, but maybe they're doing homeschool with their kid in the morning and they're really motivated starting at 2 o'clock. Maybe they're a morning person, maybe they're a night owl, right? And all of these lines are getting blurred right now with everything that's going on in the world. So it's good to know when your team is the most motivated. What could you accomplish that doesn't depend on anyone else? So sometimes, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, Lindsay, but we get in front of folks that they like to point the finger and deflect responsibility on why they're not getting the ball across the line. So I love that question. What can you get done that doesn't depend on anyone else? Give me a commitment of something you can complete. That's empowering for someone, but it's also challenging, right? Hey, it's not everyone else, it's you in the seat, you in the driver's seat. Where would you be in 30 days if you got this thing accomplished? Get people to think future, get them to plan future, and think about questions that not only you're getting a surface level answer, so as you develop your question set, but you're getting some insight into the vulnerability of how that person functions, where their head is at and how they're thinking. And again, then listen with curiosity. Not just what are they saying, how are they saying it, how are they feeling? So I think having a question toolkit is one of the most powerful things you can have as a leader. And I help leaders all the time develop these question sets and evolve them over time as they get comfortable using them. And what we find is that the engagement of their team increases and actually results start to increase. So this is just a simple tactical skill that I think leaders right now can employ, really starting, this afternoon on the next call or one-on-one that they have.
Stacie, I think these are all phenomenal tips. And I love the fact that you actually provided some examples or questions that they can look to ask, because often we hear these great ideas, but then we're like, well, what's the next step? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to implement that? So I love the fact that you did provide some practical tips there. Stacie, I'm looking forward to continuing our conversations on a weekly basis. Thanks so much for providing some insight on what leaders should be doing to help their employees and their team members right now.
Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate you.